I just grew up in an environment that told me that I could do whatever I put my mind to.
Amazing. And how did you get into Yale? Talk about a bit more about that, please.
From an academic point of view, was that I realized how linear our thinking is as doctors. I mean, it really is. I mean, history, examination, investigation, management.
And you mentioned the arts, and I know that some of your interests are philosophy and psychology, and you're an author. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So I would encourage people to go down that route. Just be confident in expressing who you are. Be confident in not looking for approval. If the approval comes later and they like what you've published, it'll be on your terms. Because one thing you can't compromise is what you stand for and your integrity, because that's something that can't be replaced. And we're not on this earth to give ourselves away to the principles and formulations of other human beings. We're here to be ourselves.
Hello, Dr. Ndikum. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Jessica. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. Just call me John. My patients call me John, but you can.
All right, then. Thank you, John. So what have you been up to today? Are you enjoying the sunshine?
Yeah, I've got a few days off, so I've been sweltering heat, so I've just been trying to keep cool. It's difficult at the best of times, but I can't complain. I've got a day off, and happier than the sunshine is people social distancing.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a few questions, some questions from myself and a lot of questions from our viewers as well. We're just going to talk a little bit more about you. This is the More Than a Doctor series, where we talk to doctors who are not only doctors, but have side hustles, side hobbies that have become their four hustles perhaps, or have, gone down the alternative route. And you are a pharmaceutical physician and you have many other hats. You're even an author as well. I know your LinkedIn says social entrepreneur, so I'm excited to talk a little bit more about what that might mean. So we'll just go into the first question. What was your journey into medicine like?
I suppose like all of us did, right? I mean, you study, you get the grades, and then you apply. No, just kidding. I come from a very academically driven family. Okay. And academia obviously was at the forefront of everybody's mind. Came in when I was 8, for the family when I was 8 years old. And I've always been, I suppose, an intellectually precocious child. I'd always been that way, always been into books, but I had a family system that nurtured that interest. I did go and visit a doctor when I was 3 or 4 years old for a problem. I have a limp. I've got a short ITB. And, I remember asking my father, who were those people in white coats? And he said, they help people. I said, I want to be one of those when I grow up. I did consider being a variety of things when I was about 11 years old, including a priest, an astronaut, an IT billionaire. And then I settled back into medicine. I went to a comprehensive school, so I had to self-organize my work experience. So I worked in a homeless shelter once a week, once every couple of weeks for a few months. My mum helped me organize work experience in a nursing home. I went to MedLink. I don't know if that still goes on, but you spend like a 3-day simulation as a medical student in Nottingham University and all kinds of things. But it was really great for the CV. And I was involved in teaching some students, like AS students, teaching them maths. And there were a few other things that I did to bolster my CV. I spent 3 days at Cambridge University on their scheme for medical students, or prospective medical students. So that really, in short, is my journey. I suppose I stayed focused. I was a little bit of a bookworm, which made things easier. But then I grew up in an environment that encouraged that praised that nurtured that.
Fantastic. So you knew really early on that you wanted to do something academic. And you said that when you were 3, 4, you were already having that doctor job on the horizon. And your branch of medicine, being a pharmaceutical physician, what is that? Tell us what that job role is. What does it entail?
I entered the pharmaceutical industry as a sub-investigator. Thing is, a lot of people don't know about the pharmaceutical medicine route. I suppose it's a newly established route. So you've got a faculty of pharmaceutical medicine, which provides training, so you can get a certificate in completion of training in pharmaceutical medicine. And there are 3 branches. First one is clinical development, which is what I did. So working in clinical trials, developing drugs, analyzing them, analyzing the different structures, configuration of the molecules and so forth, and finding out which ones are best for human studies. The second one is pharmacovigilance, which is obviously medical safety of drugs. So a drug goes to market or in the clinical trial process, there are going to be adverse events and severe adverse events. And the job of that physician really is to spot those, highlight those, and alert the relevant pharmaceutical companies about the product. And obviously the BNF is a pharmacovigilance manual, essentially. You find out a new side effect, you alert them, they insert it in the next edition of the BNF. And the third one's medical affairs, which really deals with the bridge, the intersection between clinical development and commercialization of the product. And that requires a lot more skill sets than purely the technical. You need to be, interpersonally minded. You need to have a good grasp on diplomacy. You need to have leadership capacity.
So what does your day look like, or what does your week look like?
Well, I work on behalf of pharmaceutical companies. So in clinical development at clinical trial sites, it's a lot more like it is in a clinic setting in the hospital. So I'd come in and, check email, see if I'd had any updates from medical monitors. Medical monitors are essentially the consultant, the safety consultant in the pharmaceutical company. And they would perhaps raise queries about particular patients who've recently commenced a particular drug or who are about to commence a drug. I'd look at which patients would need to be screened on a particular day, which patients are about to be randomized, so about to begin a drug. I'd check their inclusion and exclusion criteria. So the goal really was to deliver the protocol in a safe way that ensured integrity of data, because without that, the trial is absolutely useless. And my job was to guide that and make sure the team with whom I was working. And
are you allowed to tell us what the trials were looking for?
Well, I am a principal investigator in Alzheimer's disease, amyloid hypothesis, which basically says you get the formation of these amyloid plaques. We have other models. We obviously know about tau proteins, which grow inside the neuron itself and spread from neuron to neuron. That seems to activate the abnormal beta amyloid. But then what we're realizing now is that there's more of an inflammatory process going on. And recently a study has proposed that P. gingivalis, which is a gum protein, but actually secrete certain chemicals called gingipains, which might trigger an inflammatory cascade in the gut, which then indirectly causes inflammation in the brain. So there's a trial underway, which is quite interesting to actually examine.
That's really interesting because so Alzheimer's or dementia is one of my passions. And this year I intercalated and my research was in vascular-related cognitive impairment and dementia. So that's cool. Okay. So how did you find yourself doing pharmaceuticals?
Pharmaceutical medicine. Well, when I was at Yale, I considered what I was going to do. And there were various options open to me. And management consulting was one that I actually interviewed for. I interviewed with the Boston Consulting Group. I made it to the final round in Boston. And I think if I'd persevered, I was going to apply here. But when I explored it again, I realized that it took me too far away from science, at least initially. I wanted to get a deeper grounding in science and really reach at least the pinnacle in that field before I began consulting, per se. Pharmaceutical medicine fit the bill for that. I didn't want to return full-time to the NHS again. I consider myself a big picture thinker. So I'm able to do both, think big picture, but also think at a detail. So I didn't want to just go back to seeing one patient at a time, but also explore the possibilities of making a population level impact. Pharmaceutical medicine really covered those bases. So that's why it appealed to me so much. So I reached out to various agencies. I obviously, Yale, being at Yale, they helped me to optimize and tailor my CV so that it was bespoke for the industry. And it was on from that.
And how did you get into Yale? Talk about a bit more about that, please.
How did I get into Yale?
Yeah, you must have made your parents very proud. Not only medical school, but also an Ivy League ticked off.
I think I made people happy. Wait, to be honest with you, I'd always wanted to go to an Ivy League. I grew up, as many academic families do, with big dreams, and I wanted to go to Harvard. I kind of forgot about that dream to focus more on my studies and focus more on medicine. And when I was a doctor, when I was in core medical training, I remember being very frustrated by how the systems were run. And I was able to see very quickly where things were going wrong. So that big picture thinking was coming into play. And I realized that I felt too constrained in my thinking by just thinking about one patient at a time. So I started exploring public health more actively. Although I'd been, public health had bored me out of my school in medical school. I mean, I was just like, why do people do this subject? It's so dry. We didn't get told about how it was relevant to real life.
Yeah.
It was just, here are a few statistics. You analyze them, and it's like, now it makes sense. I could think, okay, you analyze these numbers to get a narrative, and from that narrative, you can extrapolate certain things which you can then adjust. Yeah. Fine. But I didn't understand that before. Anyway, I began to understand that more, and I applied to the LSE, and I withdrew my application after I got into Yale, which was actually, in hindsight, a stupid thing to do. It was quite boring.
LSE to do what?
They've got a public health type program, a joint program with I think it's HPPF. Again, big names are very important, not just from the ego point of view, but I'm very cognizant of the fact that we're living in an increasingly globalized world.
Okay.
And health taught me, actually, this is kind of going a bit forward, but I've learned that you need to put as many things to your advantage as possible. But anyway, I ended up bumping into someone who was studying at Yale, doing his master's in public health. We had a discussion. And, he made the introduction with members of the faculty. I had a chat and I applied, but the application was quite rigorous. I spent about 2 to 3 hours a day for about 3 months on my personal statement. It was rigorous. You have to do the GRE or the GMAT and apply the application process. But that's how I ended up getting in. And then I got the place and I ended up getting a scholarship as well.
Wow, well done.
From the mentors from the Rotary organization.
What was Yale like?
There was Yale and there was America. Yale was wonderful. And I think Yale forms a significant part of my identity now. I made some wonderful friends there. The faculty are absolutely, sometimes numerous amounts, like many of them are now my close friends. We talk about very, very serious things, very serious and abstract things. And, being a geek, that's what I like. What was great about Yale was the community. I normally get the quip, John, you think too much. But at Yale, I never got that. Oh my God, you think too much. Let's go for a coffee. That was very nice. I mean, I can go as far as saying, for the first time in my life, I truly, and then as a graduate student as well. It didn't really matter what background you came from. It just mattered that you were passionate about what you did and you were willing to geek out on random stuff. And so Yale was amazing. Also, one thing that was really important from the academic point of view was that I realized how linear our thinking is as doctors. It really is. History, examination, investigation, management. And after a while, you realize that you think in a very structured and linear fashion. And that really was humbling because you had some very young people who had this ability to see things multitudinously from multiple angles. And you're sitting there trying to debate your one angle, and they're coming at you from 5 different angles. And you're thinking, whoa. So eventually I developed the ability to also be able to see, one issue from multiple points of view, anticipate how the opposition might come in, to preempt that and argue accordingly.
I like that thinking of lateral thinking instead of linear, and it's true. I once had a clinical fellow tell me that you know medicine when you no longer think that there's only a right or wrong. We have to really know that there are shades of grey, and I think sometimes we are taught it's right, wrong, do this, and nothing else. And I also say that sometimes doing medicine is like a Rubik's Cube, because, you might, when you do a Rubik's Cube, you get one face and that's perfect, but then you turn the Rubik's Cube around and there's the other side is completely messed up. But sometimes you have to go with the one face being fine, and maybe you sort out the other part of the Rubik's Cube later. So it was all of a balance.
I like the analogy, and medicine definitely is an art as well as a science. Obviously, the science forms the basis of practice. And the artistic aspect is where you obviously adjust depending on the patient before you. But we're increasingly protocol driven, which obviously strips away the artistic aspect. And I suppose many medics are creative, and this kind of conveyor belt medicine that's now being practiced for legal reasons and litigious reasons, and obviously to ensure patient safety as much as possible, much more consistently, I suppose, takes away from the art form. I mean, we're beginning to understand more of physiological medicine, and there's less room for art.
And you mentioned the arts, and I know some of your interests are philosophy and psychology, and you're an author. So tell us a little bit more about that, please.
So in my poetry book, I made a lot of references to psychology and the psychology of a medic, I suppose, in the most trying times. So the poetry book was published in 2016. It's called Words of the Feather, the Mystic Musings of a Medical Man. You can find it on Amazon, or you can find it on my website, jfwndikum.com. Sorry to self-promote on your blog.
Go for it, and I'll leave all those details in the description box below as well.
But essentially, it chronicles a period of about 2 years in my medical practice, and it goes through initiation, despair, hope, and light. And those were periods when I really began to peer into the deeper aspects of my mind and really understand what my motivations were, why I did what I did. What is it that influenced me? Was it instinct? Was it choice? Was it fate? Kismet, if you will. Determinism. Is it all philosophical ideas? And as a clinician, I think all doctors become philosophical. You can't witness death as much as we do, without thinking about death as such. I'm not talking about death as in what comes after death, in terms of the meaning of life as relates to death, not just simplistic notions of death as a part of life, let's move on, but with this kind of window of opportunity that I have, whether I believe anything comes after, why am I here? And so I realized that actually we live in a society that teaches us that, what will others think of you when you die or whatever? What will you leave behind? But I think what matters more is how will you judge yourself while you're alive and when you're on your deathbed? It shouldn't matter what that FY1 thinks. What matters is how you feel. How will you measure your life? And even psychology itself is rooted in the axioms of biology, chemistry, and physiology and physics, which obviously presupposes that all of life can be explained using biology, physics, and chemistry, which is a huge presumption for a species that's only understood natural science for 300 years. So just my curiosity about life and its meaning, fundamental meaning. And for anyone listening to this, if you haven't read Viktor Frankl, then I would advise reading that. He was obviously a Holocaust survivor, and he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and developed a form of therapy called logotherapy. Logo meaning for the logos, which is the one, so it's to do with meaning. So it's psychotherapy of meaning. But I suppose I can't give a straight answer, but it kind of, I don't know if that in any way answered the question.
That most definitely answered the question, and it brought up more questions, and that is the key mark of a true philosopher. So,
yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, I like to fancy myself to a bit of a miniature philosopher of sorts.
And how did you, so writing a book, when did that idea come about, and how did that idea come to fruition then?
This will come across a little bit strange. The idea to write a book didn't actually come until all my poems were there. You see, if you read the introduction to the poem, the poetry book, you'll realize that, I talk about this in the book, and I talk about the faculty of intuition. And I see intuition as a faculty that's slightly higher than the intellect. And it synthesizes and it receives. So it's like the antenna of the brain. And I suppose you can argue that there's a kind of cosmic ether. And the information theory of physics actually provides possible evidence for this. So I'm not just chatting pseudoscience here for the scientists out there. Possibly, and Plato spoke about it in the world of ideas. So possibly there's a realm where, and who else? Rupert Sheldrake talks about this. and Carl Jung, the collective unconscious. So let's posit that there's a collective unconscious that has all the information of the species that's ever been around. And sometimes our intuition can tap into that. So you can tap into the right radio station and tap into the wavelengths of whatever's always been around. So what started happening was that this intuition, this radio station opened up, and then I literally had poems flooding into my head. I had about 6 poems a day, literally entering my head, complete, and I had to rush. Sometimes I had to jump out of the shower to write them down. I was writing them down on the back of pieces of paper. I was writing them down to my phone and so on. And so by the end of it, I had about 250 poems by the end of about a year. I've had people reach out to me saying, John, how do I get published? As in, they want the prestige of having the stamp of approval of some kind of established publisher. And I'd say you've got to think about, first of all, who's asking the question? Is it the ego? Or is it the part of you that wants to serve, that wants to make a difference? Because I've had people email me in private and say, John, this part of the poem really helped me, or I've shared this with my friend and it really helped them, thank you, or John, and say all these kind of really nice things that I've helped, that the book has helped them not feel alone. So I would encourage people to go down that route. Just be confident in expressing who you are. Be confident in not looking for approval. If the approval comes later and they like what you've published, it'll be on your terms. Because one thing you can't compromise is what you stand for and your integrity, because that's something that can't be replaced. And we're not on this earth to give ourselves away to the principles and formulations of other human beings. We're here to be ourselves.
Wow, I really like that about not waiting to be your authentic you, and therefore the right doors will open for you, and then it can be on your own terms rather than you having to sell your integrity away to get to this type of place that your ego has ascribed for you, but not your actual real self. That is really amazing. And now that you just talked about integrity, we got one question from a viewer that said, don't know what you'll think of this question, it's quite interesting. When health, politics, and economics clash, which is most important? And I saw that was actually a question that came.
When you make a jam peanut butter sandwich, which is important. Right, I hope that answers the question.
They're all intertwined.
Health, politics, and economics clash. Which is most important? Let me think about this for a little bit. Okay, this is actually my topic. So I don't think any one is more important, you see. You can think of 3 overlapping circles, and there's a confluence there. Where these 3 circles overlap, all 3 of them overlap, that's the patient outcomes, right? So all of them must intersect to get that outcome, okay? Health obviously provides us with the sense of the downstream determinants, which is the biological determinants, what we want to achieve for the patient. So that requires scientific knowledge. Policy gives us a framework for how we can achieve those goals, individual, but for as many humans as possible. Mm-hmm. And economics provides the fuel for achieving that, sustaining it, and maintaining it. So an understanding of all 3 of them is actually important. And while we're living in a time when the politicization of healthcare is causing more problems than not, unfortunately, when you wish to make a difference in healthcare at a population level, there will undoubtedly be politics. So I don't think the solution for a clinician who wants to affect change is to say, let's remove politicians from the picture. You must be able to dialogue with policymakers and bring them to your way of thinking, which brings me back to the idea of the different core competencies. Persuasion is certainly a core competency. Diplomacy is a core competency. Being able to assert your authority is a core competency, or what you call executive presence. Being able to be taken seriously. There'll be a time to make sure that you're called Dr. Ndikum, and there'll be a time to make sure that you're called John, because to achieve big picture aims, you need to have skill sets that are more than the ones which we get, apprenticed in medical school. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that answers the question amazingly. Wow. Okay, I'm just having to digest that. That is, yeah, that was profound. There are many organizations run by medical students who are wanting to change things at a policy level, because we realize that is where the change can come in so that our patients can get the best experience. What qualifications should you get after medical school if you want to go into this line of public health?
Qualifications don't teach you anything.
Okay.
Qualifications are just a badge to prove that you've done something. But they're very important. What teaches you things is dialogue, discussion, debate, and obviously experience. Think less about the qualification that you need until you have the experience.
Okay.
For example, you're a very good speaker. You're going to get better and better and better, right? And by the time, 5 years' time, by the time you're a registrar, you're going to be a very good public speaker. Then you can say, okay, fine. What qualification can I get to prove that I have this?
Okay.
And then you might become a lecturer, right? And then you have your lecture, your master's in medical education or whatever it is. And they'll say, okay, we've interviewed you because we've seen this med ed thing. You say you've got strong communication skills. Can you please elaborate? And then in that interview, the way you carry yourself will tell them that you have years of experience behind you doing this. Now, if you do the med ed, diploma, or you apply for the honorary lecturer position, and you haven't done this, you go to interview because you've got a med ed masters, and then they'll ask you, and you come and go, I don't know, and I'll be like, nah.
So this goes back to what we were talking about before when you said that live your truth and then get the approval afterwards, which I think is a mindset shift, because as a medical student, yeah, we are all high achievers, but we are quite tunnel visioned onto the letters and the badges and the but things are more than that. Your experience or the things that add value to you are not going to be something that can fit onto an A4 piece of paper, or should it be maybe?
We live in a society that is qualification driven. I've heard people say, I don't need to get these qualifications. I'm smart. I'm good at business. And it was like, it's true. But listen, bro, like you built a company without any qualifications that's got 300 people, but then you're also from a marginalized group. Like it won't hurt you to have an MBA from a particular school, not because you need it, but because it will open certain doors. Certain people will speak to you who might not have spoken with you. So it's not so much to get approval. It's to understand that we live in a society that will vet you according to quantifiable things.
Okay, fine.
And MBBS is like you don't need a medical degree to be a doctor, but an MBBS is quantifiable. There are plenty of MBBS doctors who don't know what they're talking about, and there are plenty of people there are plenty of nurses who know more than MBBS doctors. But the piece of paper is what is quantifiable.
Okay, right. So it's about being clever about it and understanding the world that we live in.
So I suppose you have to be an idealist as well as a pragmatist. When I was younger, I suppose I was, you could say, over idealistic.
Okay.
But there's nothing wrong with being over idealistic. We're where we are because some caveman thought that, it might be a good idea to build something and live inside of it. And then the next caveman thought, oh yeah, do you know what? This plant grows out of soil. What if I put that seed there? I could chill out for 6 months of the year. So we are where we are because some crazy people have come up with crazy, unrealistic ideals. But you need to turn, and I read a book called Ideals Made Real. And he said you must be able to turn your abstract ideals into reality. So you must become like the artist. The artist gets whatever comes in from the ether, the painting, the music. Mozart did that, it comes in randomly. Like Mozart had symphonies, entire symphonies entering his head. Like, bam! Man, amazing. He had entire symphonies enter his head. But then Mozart then had to use his intellect to make the ideal real, bring it to earth. And Beethoven said this, my job is to bring the thoughts of God to men. So your job is to make your ideals real. And in the process of making the ideals real, you have to deal with human beings in a capitalist world. Standing. And those things take time, and those things take negotiation, and they don't happen as an island. Something that I'm still learning. If I wasn't an idealist, I wouldn't be sat here right now talking to you. I wouldn't have written a poetry book. I wouldn't have gone to Yale. I wouldn't be doing public health and trying to affect change. I'll just be like, okay, I want X amount of money for X amount of time, and I'll just be purely pragmatic. And what kind of life is that? I mean, this is a comeback to philosophy. Like, life, the mechanistic interpretation of life is quantitative. It's not qualitative. And there's a book called The Master and His Emissary by Ian McGilchrist, which talks about this. We live in a left brain civilization where everything that is unquantifiable doesn't matter. But the most beautiful things in life can't be quantified. Or if it's sounding crazy.
No, it's amazing. Well, yeah, I enjoy philosophical debate, and I'm sure some people are appreciating it as well. And so now you're actually going back to the NHS. And how do you feel that your master's and being a clinical trials investigator will enrich you as a doctor now working in NHS compared to the doctor that was working in the NHS before you did all these things?
Again, it's about having that myopic view. As an NHS doctor, I just thought, oh, if I do my clinical competency, that's fine. Went to the corporate world and I realized that actually there are different competencies required. And I had to learn them, and I learned them the hard way. And I hope some of that has been internalized. I suppose right now I'm very well aware of what I'm capable of. I'm much more aware of my limitations and my strengths, the areas that need to be, I'm aware that I've got blind spots. So I'm aware of the need to find mentors to help me develop, to be able to be as efficient a contributor to society as possible. I'm able to see things from very many different angles in a way that I could not before. So right now, my impact in the NHS is the same. I mean, I'm helping people with COVID. But in the future, I'm hoping that I can bring all of these together to kind of coordinate service provision of healthcare.
Okay, and you've already told us some amazing advice about life in general, about going forward and growing and helping others. But just a final tip, so my audience is, medical students and perhaps junior doctors. Do you have any final advice for us?
Do you mean in general or any specific groups?
General. I know it's a bit of a vague question, but in general.
I would say, if I could give a piece of advice that my mentors have given me, it's you need to have a 10-year plan, not 5-year plan. You need to have a 10-year plan. You need to know where you want to be in 10 years, and then you need to backwards engineer and find people. Usually on LinkedIn, there are many people on LinkedIn. You reach out to me on LinkedIn. Many people who are flattered by people reaching out to them and having an informational discussion that can open up opportunities. It might not, but it will always be useful, and it will obviously improve your ability to communicate with people. The reason that's important because it allows you to focus. It gives you something to focus on. So by the time the 10 years are over, you would achieve a lot more than if you had not had a plan. So you might not know which specialty you want to go into, right? That doesn't mean you can't do presentations and publish papers and go around and present posters. It's really in advance.
Yeah.
It really, really helps you to focus so that when you're sat there thinking, oh my God, I'm at a loss, under your belt, you've got a whole host of things that will only work for you. What you don't want is like, oh, I'm at a loss, and you've got gaps in your CV all left, right, and center. And who's gonna look at you?
Yeah, extremely useful. That's amazing. So just think long distance, have not just only a 5-year plan, but also have a 10-year plan and backwards engineer. So think about, what do I want my life to look like? And therefore, what do I need to do today in order to achieve that? Which makes sense.
And it's flexible. I find it helps me in my life because I'm married. I've got a new puppy that's essentially like a pseudo human child. But then I have to restructure my plans and say, okay, fine, I want to be able to spend this amount of time with my wife, this amount of time with my family. Okay, fine. There's some periods when you don't spend as much time as you want at home with your friends and so forth. So you adjust it. But every day I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm working toward, and I adjust it. And then actually, more important than a 10-year plan, I need to say this: find mentors, informally or formally. A mentor will tell you what you have to hear, but what you need to hear. But a mentor who cares about you is doing it because they themselves have been there. And I suppose mentor, formal or informal, you're their apprentice, and you've got to treat them as such.
Yeah.
You've got to treat them like a good uncle. So with kind of enough casualness that you can go for a drink with them, but enough respect that you don't just call them at midnight and say, man, help me with this. You know, by the way, I don't know how you're doing today, but if you've got a bit of time, you don't mind checking my thoughts over. And those people are absolutely invaluable. I would not be where I am without informal mentors. And mentors also help you to see potential that you might not see in yourself. And sometimes other people have to believe in you before your self-belief catches up.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, John, for that interview, and thank you for all that advice. You've definitely given me a lot of food for thought, and I know you're going to inspire a lot of my viewers as well.
I hope so. And please, if people would like, you know, I'm quite busy, but if people would like have more questions, they'd like me to go through another kind of question and answer session in a month or so, I'd be more than happy to do that. And I think I've mentored a lot of people, and nothing gives me more joy than to pass on, well, you know, things that I think can make people's lives easier and the path to their goals a bit more smooth. Okay,
so viewers, you've heard that. You can comment down below, and we can get John to answer those questions. Exactly.
I want to do it.
Go for it. And you'll answer those questions. So thank you very much, John.
Thank you. The honor's been mine. Keep going. I've read your blog. I've seen your page. I've seen your videos. You're inspiring. At your level, I wasn't doing anything that you're doing. So just believe in yourself and keep going. I'm rooting for you.
Thank you.